But there's a real war closer to American lives. Vietnam, a bitter conflict in Southeast Asia. America fears communism will sweep the region and wants to stop its influence. But the U.S. military and all its technology comes up hard against determined guerrilla movements. And the war is being fought by hundreds of thousands of drafted young Americans.
We ask so much of our 18-year-olds to go over to a foreign land, a jungle no less, and fight guerrillas who are home on their turf and don't like at all the invading army.
The generation that's fighting the Vietnam War are the baby boomers, the biggest ever American generation. Over 50 million new Americans born in 15 post-war years. This huge generation are unlike any Americans who've come before. And their influence and attitude towards society are destined to change the face of America.
The 1960s were inevitable. The greatest generation came home with a fixed idea of what life should be about. And they were so busy putting their own lives back together again in a traditional fashion that they weren't paying attention to the changing sensibilities of their children.
America, in a way, reinvents itself every 10 or 15 years. And that reinvention is always feared by the generation that came before.
June 1969, upstate New York. Woodstock, a weekend concert for over 100,000 ticket holders, is overrun by nearly 500,000 baby boomers. Over 1 million more try to get in. It's the world's biggest ever music festival and becomes the boomers' coming out party, a signal to America of the generational change taking place.
Going from a society and culture that was fairly buttoned up and prim and proper to one that suddenly was, well, we had Woodstock, we had hippiedom, we had free love.
Baby boomers had a huge, tremendous impact on how we view the world and how we view society.
But the baby boomers aren't just rebelling against their parents' values.
People began to attempt to affect from the streets the highest levels of foreign policy.
The baby boomers want an end to the Vietnam War, and they take their protests to the streets.
But the willingness to stand up for what you believe in mass demonstrations of revolt, that's very American. In the Vietnam War, people were unwilling to die for something they didn't believe in.
Protest is deep in the American character. The Pilgrims against the old world and religious persecution. The colonies against the British and their taxes. Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman against slavery. 1970. There have been thousands of anti-Vietnam War protests. Kent State, University, Ohio. The National Guard are ordered in to control 500 protesting students. Television is here watching. Four students are shot dead.
I think that drove it home for a lot of Americans to see on their television and to have this mass of people who felt so passionately about it. The images. You know, America is a very visual country.
And because Vietnam is the first televised war, battles and casualty lists are daily news events. Television brings the reality of the war into the nation's living rooms. Just as 100 years ago, Civil War photography revealed the true horror of war, now, TV news images begin to turn the nation.
We had already lost over 50,000 soldiers, many more wounded than that. I think most Americans realized Vietnam was a hopeless cause.
More bombs than were dropped in the whole of World War II. hundreds of billions of dollars. But what most Americans remember are the pictures they see on their TV sets.
Watching people in Saigon clinging to helicopters as we left in disgrace. This is a profoundly un-American notion.
1975, and the Vietnam War is finally over.
In many ways, it really was the anti-war movement on the ground that shaped our story of Vietnam and, to some degree, the actual experience of the war.